Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode of Dungeons & Dragons Horror Stories, we examine a tale that I came across while farming for some cringe, about a player with a pretty neat character concept, only for two of the other players to throw a hissy fit over some of the mechanics of it. But before we get into that, you know the drill by now. Lucky, take it away. How could you not drop a like for that, or even share the video? But with that done, let's get right into the story. The Time I Caused a Rage Quit in D&D 5e by Reddit user Visible Efficiency 93. First time posting on here, but I thought it would be fun to recount a tale of a game that had a really rough start, but ultimately a happy ending. I'm sure that the topic, where DMs and players draw the line on a homebrew, and whether or not you should communicate all your secrets outright in the first session of the game, are topics that can be polarizing and argued over. So, know that I'm not trying to start that sort of argument with this story, just recounting events from my own perspective. And I've since acknowledged it could have been handled better, though the remaining party have convinced me out of the immense guilt I had about the whole thing. The setting: homebrew Magitech world. All races have homebrew cultures. Nothing in the regular rules is considered canon unless the DM says so. The DM does a good job of giving us all a basic rundown of the setting, expectations, and core cultures on the starting and nearby continents. The party: won't use names. Dwarf Sorcerer, great player and DM, but not the DM of this game. A noble dwarf who washed his hands of familial obligations after his mother died and now adventures under the assumption that he's been excommunicated from his home for leaving. Dwarf Cleric, adorable and lovely player who made me appreciate wholesome characters more. A former caravaner who devoted herself to the god of selflessness and sacrifice and is searching for her missing adoptive son. A human, I can't quite remember, wizard. All in all, a great player, just left later into the campaign because of scheduling issues. A necromancer who fled the continent to the south of our starting area to evade a cult of hunters who despised the evil art and go to extreme and usually evil measures to destroy it. Half-elf fighter, one of the two players who got wrapped up into the problem. As far as I could tell, so early in the game, they were a simple townfolk sort of girl who I think tried and failed to become a town guard, so became an adventurer instead. Human or half-elf, I think maybe a ranger. It's been so long, I don't quite remember. Apologies. Nothing against the player, just didn't leave as much of an impression as the fighter did. I remember they joined as a pair and were childhood friends. And lastly, me, the problem. Because the DM of our game was someone I knew, a friend that I had recently made in another successful online D&D game, he stated in the Roll20 posting that homebrew was welcome just so long as it was submitted for review and you can make a good story or character out of it. I took that with a bit of extreme liberty and proposed to play a dragon. Before you scree at me, it was a homebrew race, class, and background that gave me a functional class that was like an off-brand fighter, with a little versatility in how the build went based on your dragon type. I was a whelp, and the class let you age with levels. The DM already looked over the class, edited it for balance, then approved it. We agreed not to tell anyone about it yet, so it could be a fun surprise plot twist in the first few sessions. I guess my mistake was in not outright telling the rest of the party, but I'm a fan of taking weird or edgy tropes and making genuine characters out of them. So I figured there would be an initial shock, curiosity, and then at the end of the session, I'd post my class sheet on the Discord and answer any questions or concerns. The DM approved of it and trusted me. So, as a quick rundown for my character, remember, while we aren't using the regular dragon lore of 5e, I did mold the character's initial personality around information collected from the Draconomicon from 3.5 for some extra flavor. As a young dragon, I meant for her to start as an inherently evil and selfish alignment, and allow her to be shifted by the party over the course of the game. To quote Skyrim, "What is better, to be born good, or to overcome your evil nature through great effort?" She was a black dragon, enslaved since her hatching by a cabal of insane drow, and corrupted by the otherworldly powers of a Shadowfell portal that had been in the caves they had lived in. So, she was a black shadow dragon. As per her class, she was allowed to have one humanoid form to take for disguise purposes. Given that she was young and had no knowledge of dragons besides the inherent skills she developed through her blood, I opted to make it weird. As her backstory, pre-meeting the party, came to a climax when she killed her captors and abusers, and the form she took was of the drow girl who she thought was her only friend. But because she was immature and unable to control her power without experience or a parent, the appearance was altered, leading to a drow with black hair and purple eyes, as well as a series of dull, glowing self-inflicted slashes across her face, shoulder, and thigh that were reflections of wounds in her real form. She was a very dark and edgy character to begin with, yes, but I was hoping for some interesting development through the story and character interactions as she learned about the world, learned how to balance growing up with her inherent evil nature, etc. The game, Session 1. Edited note: we started at level 3 to get right into subclasses, and to give us wiggle room for a slightly more adventurous backstory. The party doesn't know each other yet, and, classically, it starts in a tavern. A man working for the mayor of the town comes in and makes a public announcement about the local bandit problem having gone too far now, and so the mayor is opening a public bounty on all of the bandits of the major local gang, and is asking for volunteers to come help sweep through the nearby woods to clear out where they suspect their camp might be. The party, each for their own reasons, agree to join this man, but not before we had some minor character interactions. The necromancer and I both come off as a bit dark and edgy. I even do the trope of sitting in the dark corner of the tavern, partially to ensure no predators sneak up behind me, but also because my character has massive anxieties about crowded and enclosed areas, and with sunlight sensitivity, she hates even candlelights this early into the game. But even if I play an edgelord, I will never purposely disrupt the party or plot in any massive way. So, because the DM wanted us to interact, I did. My character had a genuine interest in basically all forms of art and expression, so she saw the dwarf cleric, who I'll now be referring to as Dwarf Mom, crocheting. She approached, and Dwarf Mom immediately picked up on the fact that I was a kid, even if they didn't know I was a dragon, and used her personal skills as a mom and a caretaker to talk to me in a way that I felt didn't immediately set off red flags for my character. So I opened up a little bit, but remained an obviously edgy brat. Smash cut to the party joining up and going into the woods. We start getting into a fight with, quite honestly, an absurd amount of bandits, and it's going poorly. We sorta walked into a larger opening without scouting, and we're asking for it, and the dice were not on our side. Of course, I wasn't really helping all too well initially, because I didn't have proficiency in the axes I was using, nor did I have any armor. Since I was actively fighting in my drow disguise, I was no more useful than a commander with a hatchet. In a last-ditch effort to turn the fight, as we started to retreat into a corner, I rushed forward and revealed my truly terrifying, dog-sized form. But I rolled a natural 20 on my intimidation check. With the sudden arrival of the, albeit small, dragon, a small chunk of the bandits flee, and we're able to finish off the rest. I get about 3 words into starting to explain myself before a fighter attacks me. I only had 3 health anyway, as my class is D8s, and I went down. The party tied me up and moved to a secure location to figure out what to do with me. Intriguing, right? While I'm not actively able to defend myself, the DM lets me get in a short rest while the party sets up a campsite during the night and assumes I'm unconscious. Then, the discussion begins. Fighter and Ranger, still don't remember the second character's class, I'm sorry, argue that I'm a monster and should just be executed. Since I'm a black dragon, they, a farm girl and her friend, know inherently that I'm evil and prefer to psychologically torture my victims before I kill them, and I'm surely evil and will get them all killed. Valid points, and I was having fun. Dwarf Mom steps in to my defense, near violently so, as her motherly instinct compelled her to want to defend me, as she recognizes that I'm just a child at this stage, and I've shown the capacity for selflessness in combat by helping them, as well as not struggling or fighting once I woke up. To be fair, I started to panic, being a former slave and waking up in bondage, but Dwarf Mom calmed me down through role-playing. The dwarf sorcerer was acting as a middle ground, saw the points on both arguments, but ultimately went with the practical fact that I did help them. Necromancer sides with sorcerer, but is a bit more cautious of me. Understandable. Fighter and friend freak and leave in the dead of night. The sorcerer reluctantly heads back with them, telling the others that he'll try to smooth things over. Dwarf Mom releases me, and while I don't abandon her, I immediately kick into fight or flight mode and just hide nearby the camp, thinking even if I want to just flee now, it's obvious my chances are better if I stick with Dwarf Mom. Up until this point, my dumbass thought this was all just really good roleplay. I thought we'd be separated until they hear us in danger, then come to the rescue, and we could continue our cooperative but untrustworthy alliance. It wasn't until the walk back to town, for the fighter and friend started, that I realized that it really wasn't. Worth noting as well, at this point, the fighter demanded to see my class sheet. I gave them a brief rundown of the class, but asked to wait until after the session, where I'd show it all, and even explained I already ran it by the DM, and he was planning on letting me hide it as long as I could, as a fun plot point to reveal. The two players completely disconnected from the game, active in voice chat, but ignoring every attempt the DM made to interact with them, telling them all plot hooks to swing back into things, but they completely stonewall the DM and go back to the tavern to drink. Meanwhile, attempting to rope them back in, the DM has the bandits attack myself, Dwarf Mom, and Necromancer in the night. We were captured and set to be executed. We struggle, and I manage to escape, taking to the sky on my pathetic flight speed and trying to rush back to town. This was it, I thought. I'd come back down and show how little pride I had as a dragon as I go and beg them to help save Dwarf Mom and Necromancer, showing there's a genuine care that's reachable in my character. That never happened. Fighter and friend just stopped interacting. I didn't even get to town before it was apparent that they didn't care anymore, so I tried to save them myself, and the three of us were shanked and bled out beside a river in the forest in the dead night. At this point, nobody appears to be on the same page, so the DM steps into the player conflict and offers to retcon some of the events at the start of the next session, and to give time for him to talk to Fighter and friend. Fighter flips out, angry that I'm playing a dragon and claiming that I'm broken, despite them being able to one-shot me multiple times. And I neglected to mention that they smacked me around a bit during the tied up part. And with the session over, I offered again to post my class and talk about it. I just didn't want to interrupt the session. They then flipped out about the necromancer having a living chest. She just had a chest that was set on a floating disc spell to drag it around, but none of us had the arcane knowledge to understand that, so the DM described it as we saw it, a literal chest floating after her. They said the DM was playing favorites because I was a homebrew, while the DM wouldn't let them start with full plate armor. The DM states again that homebrew was welcome, and he approved my class and idea, and even modified minor aspects of the class for balance. I felt that was evident, as I was clearly the worst member of the party, besides my ability to sneak. But they weren't having it, and the DM restates that they denied starting with full plate and a shield, because having the high AC so early made rewarding armor difficult without stepping into magical territory, and because the DM just didn't want someone to start with it. For additional reference, my AC was like 14 to 15 at the time. Fighter and friend post a massive tangent on the Discord and then leave. I feel absolutely terrible, and I guess I just didn't read the situation in the same way, and what I thought was amazing roleplay was genuine rage. Good ending, thankfully. DM and other players are absolutely fine with the character, and the rest of us agreed to retcon the night at the start of the next session. Gooder ending. The game continued for a year or two, with a new cast joining in. Everyone was having a load of fun, and I got to see my character develop from an edgy loner, scared of the world, into a spoiled child, then into a dumb teenager who became a bit of a hippie, who actually used all of her gold she'd been building up to start an adventuring guild that became our new base of operations. Ultimately, as the game is on pause now, I went from lawful evil to recently becoming chaotic good. It was an amazing game with a lot of fun character interactions, especially with the newer additions to the party. I still actively play with and interact with everyone from the game, and the dwarf sorcerer invited me to the game he had been running at the time and the game after. I am still sorry for how things went down. I don't like the mistakes I made in communication and reading those players, but I hope they're doing well. The fact that it was a rage quit caused by me still bothers me to this day, and it's probably my one, albeit mild, horror story. If Fighter and Friend read this, I hope you're doing well. TLDR, I joined a game with approved homebrew from the DM to play a whelp dragon and caused 2 party members to rage quit once it's revealed. Edit. Worth noting that I wasn't the only homebrew in the game. Sorcerer used a homebrew sorcerer subclass, and the necromancer used a subclass as well. I'm just establishing that I wasn't going out of my way to be the only homebrew. All players had the options to present and play homebrew, and it was up to them to do so. Damn, OP's character sounds pretty cool. I don't understand why those 2 were so upset about it. They didn't even let the DM or OP explain the class, and just sounded like they were acting like spoiled brats whose parents didn't let them get a second candy bar at the grocery store. I'm glad to hear that OP and the rest of them continued the game after retconning the bad parts, and that the game is still going on to this day. I just don't like the fact that OP still feels bad about those 2 rage quitting. Dude, you shouldn't feel bad at all for the actions of pissy players throwing a tantrum. But those are just my thoughts. What do y'all think? But by the looks of it, we have a bit of time left for a small bonus story, so let's get right into it. The Good Necromancer by Reddit user Good News Crew. This one's pretty mild, but I find it humorous. I'm the DM running an online homebrew campaign in a third-party 5th edition setting. The campaign was maybe 4 or 5 sessions in. I recruited a new player and was going through character creation with him about an hour before the game. He gave me the basic concept of a good aligned necromancer, which I thought was great. I briefed him on the basics of what had been going on and some of the lore of the setting. That session, the players were helping authorities infiltrate and take over a fortified prison run by a group of rogue knights. The players run into this necromancer as he's also infiltrating the prison on a similar mission. The new necromancer steps out and reveals his character art, which I'm seeing for the first time, and it's this super cringy, monstrously mutated human. I smirk to myself, but continue on. It's just art, and maybe this is a don't judge a book by its cover situation. So we have a scary looking but good aligned necromancer. Well, the group continues on and eventually liberates all the prisoners by defeating the warden and a few guards. When the battle was decided, the remaining prison guards and knights all drop their weapons and I pause initiative. We start to RP things when the good necromancer says, quote, "I cast a spell at the guard who hit me earlier." Okay. So much for that good alignment, but player agency and all. So I let the guy cast Chromatic Orb, and he misses. I allowed the guard to pick up his sword and lunge at the necromancer. Before I can even make the roll, the guy rage quits. I narrate the guard decapitating the necromancer, then dropping his sword again and shrugging. Thus ends the tale of the so-called good necromancer. Well, that guy sure lasted a long time in that game. I mean, what was he expecting the DM to do with that guard after the necromancer attacked him while he was unarmed? But hey, at least this player rage quit early. That way OP didn't have the chance to have more horror stories involving this dude. Do you have a story about people getting upset over nothing in a tabletop RPG? If so, and would like it to be read in the video, be sure to post it in the comments, on the channel subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope all of your rolls are natural 20s. Until next time.